Hello everyone and welcome to e-sipnayan, your math guide through senior high school. So for today's video, we're going to be discussing markup, mark on, and markdown. But of course, before anything else, please don't forget to like and subscribe e-sipnayan so that you'll be notified with our new videos. So hopefully at the end of this lesson, you will be able to differentiate and as well illustrate mark on, markdown, and markup. But before that, let us determine the terms to remember. Now we have the selling price, which is the amount at which the product is to be sold, and as well as the cost price, which involves the fixed cost and as well as the variable cost. Let's move on to markup. We define markup as the difference between the selling price and the cost price, and it is computed based on the markup percentage. So we have here the common formulas that we need to determine our markup amount. So we have markup amount is equal to the selling price minus the cost price, or the markup amount is equal to the markup percent multiplied by the cost price. So these are the two formulas that we can use to determine our markup. And also, we have our markup percentage, and a markup percentage is a percentage of the cost price that the company wanted to add to determine the selling price of the product. So the markup percent is equal to 100 multiplied by the markup amount over the cost price. So for example, we have this example. How much must the selling price of a monoblock table with a cost price of 525 pesos if the desired markup percentage is 28%. So what we have to do is to determine what is given. We are given with the cost price, which is equal to 525 pesos, as well as the markup percentage, which is 28%. So here we are to find the selling price of our monoblock table. Okay, so now that we know what is given as well as what is missing, let us try to determine what formula do we have to use. So since we are given with the cost price and as well as the markup percentage, we can use the formula markup is equal to the markup percentage multiplied by the cost. Now, using this formula, we can substitute whatever is given. We have markup is equal to 0.28 times 525. So please take note, instead of using 28%, I use its decimal equivalent, which is 0.28. So our markup is equal to 147 pesos. Now, using our markup, we can determine our selling price. Since we know that the markup is given as the markup is equal to the selling price minus the cost, we can use this formula to determine our selling price. So substituting what is given, we have 147 is equal to the selling price minus 525. Now, to solve for P, we can transpose negative 525 to the other side of the equation. Therefore, we have 147 plus 525 equal to SP. Simplifying this equation, we have SP is equal to 672. Now that we have simplified this, we have gotten the selling price of our monoblock table, which is 672 pesos. For example number 2, how much was the cost price of a backpack sold for 381.90 pesos if the markup percentage is 34%? We are given with the selling price, which is equal to 381.90 pesos, and the markup percentage, which is equal to 34%. And we are to find the cost price of the backpack sold. And so, given that we only have the selling price and our markup percentage, we can use the formula of getting the markup. Okay, the markup is equal to the markup percentage times the cost. Now, we can use this by substituting what is given. We have markup is equal to 0.34 times C. Now, we know that this is the temporary value for markup. We can use another formula in getting the cost. So, the other formula is markup is equal to the selling price minus the cost. Now, substituting what the value of markup is here, we have 0.34C is equal to the selling price minus the cost. Simplifying this or combining our like terms by transposing C to the other side, we have 0.34C plus C is equal to our selling price. So since these are common terms, because they both have the same variables, which is C, we can add them together. So 0.34C plus C is 1.34C. And then we have the selling price, which we can also determine as 381.90, dividing both sides by 1.34. We can cancel this one. Then C is equal to 285 pesos. So the cost of the backpack is 285 pesos. Now let us proceed to our mark-on. A mark-on is a temporary markup on a certain product. So it depends on the occasion if we are to have a mark-on. So the difference between a mark-on and a markup is that a markup is an additional value to our cost. But a mark-on is another additional value to the current selling price. So there is an increase in selling price with our mark-on because it is on high demand. So the following are our formulas for mark-on. We have the mark-on amount, which is equal to the new selling price minus the current selling price, and the mark-on amount could be equal to the mark-on percent times the current selling price. Okay, so let us move on to our example. If a fast-selling item in a department store is currently being sold for 675.35 pesos, because of a high demand for the item, the store decided to apply a mark-on percentage of 22%. Find the new selling price. So we have here the current selling price, which is equal to 675.35, and we have also our mark-on percentage, which is equal to 22%. Now, to determine our new selling price, we make use of our formula for the mark-on. We know that mark-on is equal to the mark-on percentage times the current selling price. So, substituting all of our values, we have the mark-on is equal to 0.22 times 675.35. And simplifying this one, we know that our mark-on is equal to 148.14. Now that we have our mark-on, we can determine our new selling price by utilizing the other formula. We have our mark-on is equal to the new selling price minus the current selling price. So, substituting what is given, we have 148.14 is equal to the new selling price minus 675.35, and transposing this one to the other side, we have 148.14 plus 675.35 is equal to the new selling price. Now, simplifying this one, we have 823.93 as our new selling price. As for the markdown, a markdown is defined as the reduction in the selling price of the merchandise. So a cause of a markdown may be some products are slow to be sold, or a markdown may also be used if there are competitors in the business. Now, to determine a markdown amount, it could be equal to the current selling price minus the new selling price, or a markdown percent multiplied by the current selling price. Now, let us use this for example. How much markdown percentage was applied to a jacket whose previous price of $798 is now sold for $654.36. Now, it is obvious here that the old selling price or the current selling price is equal to $798, while the new selling price is $654.36. Now, to determine our markdown percentage, we need to first identify what is our markdown. So, the markdown is determined as the markdown equal to the current selling price minus the new selling price. Now, markdown is equal to 798 minus 654.36. And then simplifying this one, we have 143.64. Now that we know our markdown, let us use it to determine our markdown percentage. So we know that another formula for the markdown is equal to the markdown percentage multiplied by the current selling price. Now, our markdown is 143.64 equal to the markdown percentage multiplied by 798. Now, to isolate our markdown percentage, we divide both sides by 798. Now, simplifying our equation, we have 18% as our markdown percentage. Now, for another example regarding markdown, we find the previous selling price of a shirt which now sells at 219 pesos, which is given a markdown percentage of 27%. So we have here the new selling price, which is 219, and we also have the markdown percentage, which is equal to 27%. Now, to determine our previous selling price, we make use of our formula, which is the markdown is equal to the markdown percent times the current selling price. So, we have here MD is equal to 0.27 times the current selling price. So, since we don't know much of the values, we make use of another formula. We have here the markdown is equal to the current selling price minus the new selling price. And substituting what we have right here, we have 0.27 times the current selling price is equal to the current selling price minus 219. Now, combining like terms, which we have here the same variables, we transpose 219 to the other side of the equation, as well as 0.27 SPC to the other side of the equation. We have 219 is equal to the current selling price minus 0.27 multiplied with the current selling price. Now, simplifying this, we have 219 is equal to 0.73 times the current selling price. Now, to isolate this one, this variable, we divide both sides by 0.73. Simplifying our equation, we have 300, which is our current selling price or our previous selling price. Now, let us define what is a margin. So, a margin is defined as the difference between the selling price and the cost price. You may be familiar with the term, the difference between the selling price and the cost price, because it's very similar to getting a profit. But there is a difference between the gross margin and a profit margin. Even though if they have an equal value. So a gross margin is based always on the selling price of the product rather than the cost. If we talk about a profit margin, it will always be based on the cost price. And again, a gross margin will be based on our selling price. So a gross margin percent is equal to the margin amount over the selling price multiplied by 100. So let us determine the difference between a markup percentage and a gross margin of a rubber shoes with a cost price of 1,765 and a selling price of 2,153.33. So if we are to compare it, let's write here the markup percentage. And here we have the gross margin percentage. Now, for us to determine the markup percentage, let us first determine what is our markup. Our markup would be equal to the selling price minus the cost. And to determine that, let us substitute our values. We have the markup is equal to 2,153.33 minus 1,765. Now that we have our markup, which is equal to 388.33, let us use the markup percentage formula, which is the markup percentage is equal to 100 times the markup amount over our cost. Now that we have those values, let us try to substitute. We have 388.33 over 1,765. Now, simplifying this, we have a markup percentage which is 22%. Now, if we are talking about the gross margin, we still need our markup amount. And we can determine that by the selling price minus the cost, which we know to be 2,153.33 minus 1,765. And simplifying this, we know that the markup is 388.33. So as you can notice, it is the same markup, but it differs in our gross margin. Our gross margin can be seen as, so our gross margin percentage is solved as 100 multiplied by the markup amount, which is 388.33, but divided by our selling price, which is 2,153.33. So our gross margin is equal to 18.03. So this is the difference between a markup percentage and a gross margin percentage. Again, a markup will always be based on the cost, and a gross margin will be based on our selling price. So I hope that you learned a lot for today's video, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to e-sipnayan, and see you in our next video.